A restless horse senses danger before anyone else notices. On a stormy night, a forbidden encounter on the bridge changes everything, and fate defies all odds. The rain punished Riverdale that June night, transforming streets into small streams and the sky into an immense grey curtain of uncertainty. Emily Foster adjusted the brakes of her wheelchair as she watched the suspension bridge loom impressively before her, its colourful lights reflecting on the soaked asphalt like fallen stars. "I can't turn back now," she murmured to herself, feeling her heart hammer against her chest. In the inner pocket of her jacket, she carried the flash drive that could change everything. For months, Emily had gathered documents proving a $1 million embezzlement scheme involving powerful businessman Anthony Norton, one of the most influential men in the city. The phone vibrated in her pocket. It was Madison, her best friend and colleague at the equestrian center where she worked as a therapeutic riding instructor. Please reconsider. This man is way too dangerous." "I've made my decision, Maddie. If I don't do this, nobody will." "At least tell me where you are. I can get there in 20 minutes. Emily hesitated, looking up at the stormy sky. "At the suspension bridge, but don't come. I need to do this alone." She hung up before Madison could argue. Hours earlier, when leaving home, she had received an anonymous call. The voice on the other end of the line was distorted, but the warning was clear. She was playing with fire. Despite the adrenaline that ran through her spine, Emily did not hesitate. At the New Horizon Equestrian Center, miles away, Lightning, the majestic chestnut horse that had accompanied Emily for years, was restless. The animal kept whinnying, scratching the ground with his powerful hooves. The staff tried to calm him, but something seemed wrong. "I've never seen him like this," commented Pete, the handler, trying to offer carrots that the animal refused. Meanwhile, on the bridge, a luxurious black car parked a few yards from Emily. The door slowly opened, and Anthony Norton emerged, impeccable as always, wearing an Italian suit that contrasted with the darkness around him. His angular face displayed a calculated expression, a mixture of false surprise and rehearsed patience. "Miss Foster, what a surprise to find you here, especially in this weather," he said, approaching with measured steps. "I'm not here for small talk, Anthony." The use of his first name made him arch his eyebrows. He was used to being called Dr. Norton or Mr. President, titles he had carefully cultivated over the years as head of Norton Construction. "I have something that might interest the newspapers and the police," Emily continued, pulling out the flash drive. "Or we can talk like adults about how you're going to repair the damage you've caused." Anthony listened in silence, showing no emotion as she revealed the contents of the flash drive. Each document, each illegal transaction exposed there could put him in the crosshairs of justice. When she finished, he smiled. Not a smile of nervousness or surrender, but the smile of someone who already had a plan. "Your courage is admirable, Emily. Few people would dare to confront me like this." He paused, analyzing the young woman. "But I'm afraid you don't understand the rules of this game." In a calculated movement, Anthony moved closer. The strong wind whipped their faces and the rain intensified. Emily instinctively retreated, but the wheels of her chair slipped on the wet surface. "What exactly do you expect to achieve with this?" he asked, his voice almost inaudible under the roar of the storm. "Justice," Emily replied, holding the flash drive firmly. "And I'll get it, with or without your cooperation." In the sky, lightning cut through the darkness, momentarily illuminating Anthony Norton's now somber countenance. He took another step toward Emily, his eyes fixed on hers. "Do you really believe anyone will listen to a therapeutic riding instructor against one of the most powerful men in Pennsylvania?" "The truth always finds a way, Anthony," she replied, determined. He laughed, a cold sound that mingled with the thunder that echoed above them. "We'll see." If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. In a sudden movement, Anthony lunged forward and pushed Emily's wheelchair. The impact against the protective railing made the metal vibrate, and for a terrible moment she felt suspended in the air. Her chair tilted dangerously over the edge of the bridge, and then came the fall. The shock with the icy water was brutal. The current, fed by the intense rains of the past few days, dragged her mercilessly. The weight of the wheelchair pulled her down, while the murky water made any attempt at reaction difficult. The cold cut through her muscles like invisible blades, and the air began to run out. "Help!" she shouted, swallowing water. Her voice was muffled by the storm. Above, on the bridge, Anthony observed the river for a few seconds, making sure there were no witnesses. Satisfied, he turned and walked calmly to his car. In his mind, the plan was perfect. The next day, he would control the narrative. An unfortunate accident, perhaps even an impulsive act by someone who couldn't handle some personal pressure. What Anthony didn't know was that, despite having disabled the main cameras on the bridge, an old security camera, forgotten after the last renovation, was still working at a discreet angle, partially recording the incident. At the New Horizon Equestrian Center, Lightning's agitation had reached alarming levels. The horse whinnied frantically, pushing the door of his stable with increasing force. "He's going to knock everything down," shouted Pete, trying unsuccessfully to calm the animal. With one final push, Lightning managed to force the door latch. Free! He bolted through the property like an arrow, ignoring the desperate calls of the staff. He jumped the low fence and hit the dirt road, his inexplicable instinct guiding him through the storm. In the river current, Emily fought for survival. Her strong arms, developed after years of maneuvering her chair and practicing adaptive sports, beat against the water in desperate attempts to stay afloat. She managed to free herself from the chair, but the current still dominated her. "I can't give up," she thought, as she tried to direct her body toward the shore. "I need to expose the truth." That's when a familiar sound broke through the chaos. A whinny, a desperate call that she would recognize anywhere. And then on the riverbank appeared Lightning, his muscular body covered by rain, his eyes fixed on the water. The horse ran from side to side, agitated, his breath forming clouds of vapor in the cold air. His intelligent eyes finally caught a movement in the darkness. Emily struggling to surface. Without hesitation, the animal entered the water. Lightning's strength was impressive, but the current was treacherous. Between whinnies and splashes, the animal managed to reach Emily, pushing her with his muzzle until she could grab onto his wet mane. The horse swam with difficulty, but with determination, slowly guiding them toward the less steep bank. The unusual scene caught the attention of a solitary fisherman, sheltering from the rain under a small covering. Archie Miller, a simple man who knew the river like the back of his hand, did not hesitate to act. He grabbed his rope and ran to the bank. "Hold tight!" he shouted, throwing the rope toward Emily and Lightning. With joint effort, Archie and Lightning managed to bring Emily to shore. She was conscious, but her breathing was irregular, and her lips had acquired a worrying bluish tone. "My God, miss, what happened?" asked Archie, taking off his coat to cover her. "He pushed me," whispered Emily, shaking uncontrollably. "Who?" asked the fisherman, already dialing emergency services on his old cell phone. Emily didn't answer. Her hands, almost without strength, fumbled through the soaked pockets of her jacket. The flash drive had disappeared. All the documents, all the evidence was lost. Lightning approached, touching his muzzle to Emily's face, as if wanting to transmit warmth and comfort. She entwined her trembling fingers in the animal's wet mane. "Thank you, friend," she murmured. While the ambulance was being called, Anthony Norton was returning calmly to his mansion in the Westfield neighborhood. Entering his private office, he poured himself an expensive whiskey and looked out the panoramic window that offered a privileged view of the city. The storm was beginning to subside, and he smiled, confident that his secret was safe once more. However, in a small shed near the suspension bridge, a third-party security guard was reviewing the day's recordings as part of his routine. His eyes widened when the grainy image showed what appeared to be a person in a wheelchair being pushed off the bridge. "My God, what is this?" he muttered, moving closer to the screen. The next morning, rays of sunlight timidly pierced the clouds that still lingered over Riverdale. At Holy Cross Hospital, Emily was slowly awakening. The white light of the room hurt her eyes, and she blinked several times to adjust. By her side, Madison slept uncomfortably in an armchair, "Maddie?" Emily called, her voice hoarse. Madison woke with a start. "Em, thank God you're okay." She approached, holding her friend's hand. "When they called me from the hospital, I almost had a collapse. How did they find me?" "A fisherman called emergency services. He said something about a horse saving you. Is it true that lightning showed up at the river?" Emily nodded, trying to organize the confusing memories of the previous night. "He found me in the water. Maddie, it was Anthony. He pushed me off the bridge when I showed him the evidence I have against him." Madison swallowed hard. "We need to call the police." "No." Emily held her friend's arm with surprising strength. "We don't have proof. The flash drive is gone, and it'll be my word against his." At that same moment, in Anthony Norton's elegant apartment, the businessman was having breakfast while watching the local news. The reporter was speaking animatedly about the miraculous rescue of a therapeutic riding instructor who had fallen from the suspension bridge during the storm. Emily Foster, 28, was rescued thanks to the unusual intervention of her own horse, which escaped from the New Horizon Equestrian Center and inexplicably found its owner in the river. According to fisherman Archie Miller, who helped in the rescue, the animal swam to the young woman and guided her to shore. Emily, who uses a wheelchair after a car accident 5 years ago, is hospitalized in stable condition at Holy Cross Hospital. Anthony's smile disappeared. He adjusted the volume of the television when the reporter continued. "The young instructor is known for her work with therapeutic riding, helping children with disabilities through contact with horses. The circumstances of her fall are still being investigated. Police do not rule out the possibility of an accident due to the adverse weather conditions of last night." Anthony turned off the television with an abrupt movement. He needed to rethink his strategy. Emily had survived, which meant she could talk. He picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. "Richard, I have a problem that needs to be solved." Richard. Miller, head of security at Norton Construction and Archie's older brother, was a man of few words and many resources. "I'm listening, boss." "That therapeutic riding instructor, Emily Foster. She could create problems for us. I want to know everything about her, and mainly, I want that flash drive she mentioned." At the hospital, Emily was receiving a visit from Detective Paul Reynolds, a middle-aged man with shrewd eyes that didn't match his tired appearance. "Ms. Foster, can you tell me exactly what happened last night?" Emily hesitated. Without the flash drive, without concrete proof, her accusation would sound like a delusion, and Anthony would certainly mobilize his contacts to discredit her. "I went to the bridge to think," she began, carefully choosing her words. "I like to go there at night when there's less movement. With the rain, I think the wheels of my chair slipped." The detective observed her carefully, his countenance revealing that he wasn't convinced. "Are you sure that's what happened?" Madison, who was watching the conversation from the corner of the room, gave her friend a significant look. "Tell the truth," her eyes said. Before Emily could respond, the door to the room opened. To everyone's surprise, Anthony Norton entered, carrying an extravagant bouquet of flowers. "My God, Emily, what a scare you gave us," he exclaimed, his expression of concern so well rehearsed that anyone would believe it. "I came as soon as I heard. We're all relieved that you're well." The detective raised his eyebrows. "You know each other?" "Of course," Anthony replied quickly. "Norton Construction is the main sponsor of Emily's therapeutic riding project. We're very proud of her work." Emily felt her blood freeze. Anthony's audacity was impressive. He approached, placing the bouquet on the bedside table, and leaned in as if to kiss her on the cheek. His lips came close to her ear. Without the flash, "Drive, you have nothing against me," he whispered, so low that only she could hear. "If you talk, I'll destroy everything you've built, starting with your precious equestrian center." He backed away, smiling at the detective. "I should talk to your doctors about transferring you to a private hospital. I want to ensure you receive the best possible treatment." Emily felt anger growing inside her, but maintained a neutral expression. "That won't be necessary, Anthony. I'm well taken care of here." The detective observed the interaction with interest. "Mr. Norton, what a coincidence to find you here. We're investigating the circumstances of Ms. Foster's fall. Were you at the suspension bridge last night?" "Anthony." showed no sign of nervousness. Me? No, I spent the night in a video conference with Japanese investors. My assistant can confirm the times. Of course, the detective nodded, taking notes. Well, I think I have enough information for now. Miss Foster, please contact me if you remember any other details. When the detective left, Madison also withdrew to get coffee, leaving Emily and Anthony alone in the room. The businessman's smile disappeared instantly. I hope you understood the message, dear Emily. You have no idea who you're dealing with. She held his gaze, a renewed determination growing within her. On the contrary, Anthony, you're the one who has no idea who I am. 3. Days later, Emily was discharged from the hospital. Without her wheelchair, which had been lost in the river, she had to accept a borrowed chair from the hospital until she could get a new one. I can't believe you're leaving like this, protested Madison, pushing the chair down the hallway. You should spend a few more days. Go under observation. I've already lost too much time here, replied Emily, her gaze determined. I need to get back to the equestrian center. Lightning must be worried. What Emily didn't reveal to her friend was her plan to return to the bridge to look for clues or the lost flash drive, despite knowing that the chances were minimal after so many days and with the streets having been cleaned after the storm. As they left the hospital, they were surprised by a young woman waiting for them near the entrance. Tall, with dark hair cut in a modern bob, she dressed with discreet elegance and carried a folder under her arm. Emily Foster, she asked, approaching. My name is Diana Cameron. I'm an investigative journalist with the Pennsylvania Tribune. Can we talk? Madison positioned herself protectively beside her friend. This isn't a good time for interviews. I'm not here for a simple interview, Diana replied, her tone dropping to a whisper. I've been investigating Anthony Norton for months, and I know you didn't accidentally fall from that bridge. Emily and Madison exchanged glances. How can we trust you? Asked Emily. Diana looked around, making sure they weren't being observed. Because I have this, she said, discreetly opening the folder to show a flash drive, found by one of my contacts on the riverbank, near where you were rescued. I haven't been able to access the files yet. They're protected by a password. Emily felt her heart race. Could it be possible that her flash drive had been found? Let's go somewhere more private, Emily suggested. They headed to a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the hospital. Seated at a secluded table, Diana explained her story. I started investigating Norton Construction's operations after receiving reports of irregularities in public bids. But whenever I get close to something concrete, the witnesses clam up or the evidence mysteriously disappears. Anthony has influential people in every sector of the city. How did you know about me? Asked Emily. Your rescue made the news, and when I saw Anthony's name linked to the equestrian center where you work, I decided to investigate. I talked to the fisherman who helped save you, Archie Miller. He told me you mentioned being pushed. Did Archie tell the police that? He said he tried, but no one seemed interested. And yesterday, he found the flash drive while fishing in the same stretch of river. He remembered my visit and sought me out. Madison, who had remained silent until then, spoke up. This is way too dangerous. You don't know Anthony like I do. Emily and Diana turned to Madison, surprised. What do you mean by that? Asked Emily. Madison took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. Before working at the Equestrian Center, I was an executive assistant at Norton Construction. That's where I first heard about the fraudulent bidding schemes. When I started asking questions, I was fired without explanation, with a generous severance package and a confidentiality agreement. Emily looked at her friend, astonished. Why did you never tell me this? Because I was afraid. I still am. Anthony isn't just dishonest, he's ruthless with anyone who crosses his path. Diana was quickly taking notes in her notebook. That explains why he showed up at the hospital with all that theater, reflected Emily. He knows I have evidence, but he doesn't know if I made copies or shared it with anyone. What exactly did you discover about him? Asked Diana. Emily explained how she had collected documents proving Anthony's involvement in a scheme of overcharging for public works, diversion of materials, and bribes paid to city inspectors. The flash drive password is Lightning 2019, revealed Emily. My horse's name and the year I started the investigation. Diana connected the flash drive to her laptop and typed the password. The files appeared on the screen, organized by date and type of fraud. "This is incredible," murmured the journalist, scrolling through the documents. "With this, we can bring down not just Anthony, but the entire corruption network around him." While the three women talked, they didn't notice the man sitting a few tables away, apparently focused on his newspaper. Richard Miller was watching them discreetly, attentive to every gesture. When he saw the flash drive being connected to the laptop, he picked up his phone and sent a message. "I found our journalist. She's with Foster and has what we're looking for." Anthony's response was immediate. "Don't do anything now. Just follow. I want to know everything they're planning." At the equestrian center, meanwhile, Lightning remained agitated, despite the handler's efforts to calm him down. The animal refused to participate in normal activities and stayed near the gate as if waiting for Emily's return. Pete, the most experienced handler, had never seen such behavior. "It's like he knows she's coming back today," he commented to a colleague. Back at the coffee shop, the three women were outlining a plan. "We need to act with extreme caution," advised Diana. "I'll keep a copy of these files in a safe place and start preparing the article. Meanwhile, you two should act normally." "And what if he tries something again?" asked Madison, visibly concerned. "That's precisely why we should keep everything secret for now," replied Diana. "When the article is published, the documents will also be simultaneously sent to the federal police and the prosecutor's office. Anthony won't be able to cover up the case." Emily looked out the coffee shop window, observing the city she loved so much. Something inside her said that the battle was just beginning and that it would be more difficult than she imagined. But for the first time in days, she felt she wasn't alone. "Let's do this," she decided, extending her hand to the other two, who squeezed it in a silent pact. What none of them knew was that time was working against them, and that Anthony was already several steps ahead in his own game. Anthony Norton's private office on the top floor of the imposing building that housed Norton Construction's headquarters was a perfect example of power and opulence. With a panoramic view of downtown Riverdale, the environment was decorated with valuable art pieces and exclusive designer furniture. That morning, however, not even the luxury around him could calm the businessman's irritation. "How did you let this happen?" he vociferated, hitting his fist on the tempered glass table. Before him, Richard Miller remained impassive, accustomed to his boss's outbursts of anger. "We couldn't predict that the flash drive would be found, much less that it would fall into the hands of a journalist. And your brother. What a convenient coincidence that he was there to rescue that girl." Richard adjusted his posture, visibly uncomfortable. "Archie is a fisherman. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He knows nothing about our business." Anthony paced back and forth, his agile mind calculating possibilities. This Diana Cameron. What do we know about her? Investigative journalist, 32, single. She has a history of articles on political and business corruption. She's won some awards and, from what we've gathered, is considered incorruptible. "Everyone has a price," murmured Anthony, stopping in front of the window to observe the city he considered his territory. "She's been working for the Pennsylvania Tribune for 5 years. Before that, she passed through smaller outlets, always in investigative reporting," continued Richard, consulting his notes. "She has good contacts in the district attorney's office and the FBI." Anthony smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then we'll attack from another flank. If we can't buy the journalist, we'll buy the newspaper." He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Charles, Anthony Norton. I need an urgent favor. I want to know who the major shareholders of the Pennsylvania Tribune are and which ones are going through financial difficulties." Meanwhile, at the New Horizon Equestrian Center, Emily was finally returning to work. The reunion with Lightning was emotional. As soon as he saw her, the animal whinnied and ran to the fence, stretching his neck to touch her face with his muzzle. "I missed you too, buddy," she said, stroking the horse's mane with teary eyes. "Thank you for saving me." Madison observed the scene with a smile, but her eyes revealed concern. "Are you sure you're ready to come back? It's been only 4 days since, well, you know. I've never been more ready, replied Emily, adjusting her position in the new wheelchair she had obtained through a hospital assistance program. We need to maintain a normal routine so as not to raise suspicions. Emily's arrival drew the attention of everyone at the equestrian center. The students, especially the children, came running to hug her. Everyone had heard the story of the miraculous rescue, and Lightning was now treated as a hero by the little ones. Teacher Emily, is it true that Lightning swam in the river to save you? Asked Julia, an 8-year-old girl with mild cerebral palsy who had been attending therapeutic riding sessions for 2 years. It's true, Jules, confirmed Emily, smiling. He's a super horse. Like the Flash, exclaimed the girl, referring to her favorite superhero. Emily laughed, feeling momentarily light for the first time in days, but the feeling of relief didn't last long. In the distance, she saw an elegant black car parking near the entrance of the center. From it emerged Anthony Norton, impeccable in his navy blue suit. Keep the children in the covered area, Emily instructed Madison in a low voice. I'll see what he wants. Anthony walked through the equestrian center as if he owned the place, greeting staff and observing the facilities with an appraising eye. When he saw Emily approaching, he put on an artificial smile. Emily, good to see you back at work. You seem to be recovering well. What do you want, Anthony? She asked directly, maintaining a safe distance. Just checking how the construction company's investment is doing. After all, we are the main sponsors of this wonderful project, aren't we? You've never invested a cent here. Anthony smiled, even more bending down to be at her eye level. But nobody needs to know that. In fact, I have excellent news. Norton Construction has officially decided to sponsor the New Horizon Equestrian Center with a generous monthly donation. The contract is already being drafted by my lawyers. I don't want your money, said Emily, trying to control her growing irritation. But it's not for you, he replied, his voice taking on a threatening tone despite his permanent smile. It's for all these adorable children. It would be her shame if the center had to close due to financial problems, don't you think? At this moment, Lightning approached, agitated by Anthony's presence. The horse snorted and stomped his hooves on the ground, clearly disturbed. Seems like your hero doesn't like me very much, commented Anthony, moving slightly away from the animal. He senses people's character, Emily retorted. Funny, I always. Heard that horses are easily tamed with the right approach, he replied, his gaze fixed on Lightning. Sometimes they just need to understand who's in charge. The veiled threat didn't go unnoticed. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Just say what you came here to do, Anthony. I came to propose a simple deal. You give me all copies of those documents. Convince your journalist friend to drop the story, and in return, I not only keep this place running but expand its facilities. Think of the possibilities, Emily. We could double the number of children served. And if I refuse? Anthony's smile disappeared, giving way to a cold, calculating expression. Then I'll use all my resources to destroy this place. And believe me, I have many ways to make it seem completely legal and justifiable. Before Emily could respond, her phone rang. It was Diana. I need to take this, she said, moving a few yards away from Anthony. Emily! Diana's voice sounded urgent. We have a problem. The owner of the newspaper just suspended my investigation into Norton without explanation. When I insisted, I was placed on administrative leave. Emily looked at Anthony, who was observing the conversation with a victorious smile as if he knew exactly what was happening. He's already started to act, said Emily quietly into the phone. What do we do now? I have a plan B. Meet me tonight at the cafe where we talked before. And Emily, be careful. He's playing hardball. Upon hanging up, Emily turned to Anthony. Impressive how quickly you move. You've already reached the newspaper owner. As I said, I have resources. So what's your answer to my proposal? Emily looked around, at the children playing happily, at Lightning, who was watching her attentively, and at Madison, who was following. Everything from a distance with visible concern. I need time to think, she finally replied. You have until tomorrow. Anthony conceded, adjusting the sleeves of his suit. After that, the consequences will be inevitable. As he walked away toward his car, Emily felt the weight of the impossible choice she would have to make: sacrifice truth and justice or risk everything she had built, including the future of the children who depended on the equestrian center. Lightning approached, gently resting his head on her shoulder, as if sensing her anguish. "What do I do now, friend?" she whispered, not expecting an answer. Night fell over Riverdale, bringing with it a fine, persistent drizzle. In the cafe chosen for the meeting, Emily watched the raindrops running down the window, forming almost hypnotic patterns on the glass. The place was almost empty at that hour, except for an elderly couple in a corner and a middle-aged man working. On his laptop, Madison nervously stirred the coffee in front of her without drinking. "I don't like this, Em. Anthony is surrounding us from all sides." "That's why we need Diana's plan B," replied Emily, checking the clock. "She should be here by now." As if summoned by her words, the journalist appeared at the cafe door. Her hair was wet from the rain, and she carried a tattered backpack instead of the elegant folder she normally used. As she approached the table, Diana looked different. Her restless eyes examined the environment before sitting down. "Sorry for the delay. I needed to make sure I wasn't being followed." "Situation that... serious?" asked Madison. "Worse than we imagined," confirmed Diana, lowering her voice. "I wasn't just suspended from the investigation. When I went back to the newspaper to get some personal things, I discovered that my computer had been accessed, and my files about Norton were deleted." "And the backup copies?" questioned Emily. "Fortunately, I'm paranoid by nature," replied Diana with a half smile, opening her backpack and removing a small box. "My flash drive with backup was well guarded at home, and I've already made 3 more copies, distributed in safe locations." "Great. So what now?" Diana looked around once more before continuing. "If we can't use the newspaper, we need another platform. I have a contact at Pennsylvania TV, Gregory Turner. He hosts the Direct Connection program, which focuses on investigative journalism. We talked this afternoon and he's interested in the story." "Can we trust him?" asked Madison, skeptical. "If Anthony managed to reach the owner of your newspaper, who guarantees he won't do the same with the TV station?" "Gregory is different. He has editorial autonomy guaranteed in his contract and an untouchable reputation. He's taken down powerful politicians and businessmen before. Besides, he works with a small trusted team, which reduces the risk of leaks." Emily pondered for a moment, analyzing the pros and cons. "Even with TV coverage, we'll need more than documents. Anthony can claim they're forged, that it's an attempt to extort money from him." "That's why we need witnesses," agreed Diana. "Madison, you worked at Norton Construction. Would you be willing to speak?" Madison paled. "I don't know. I'm afraid of what might happen. He knows my family, knows where I live." "I understand your fear," said Emily gently, holding her friend's hand. "But think about how many people he has already harmed and will continue to harm if he's not stopped." A tense silence fell over the table. At that moment, Emily's cell phone vibrated with a message. "I discovered something important. Need to see you in person. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the maintenance shed of the Equestrian Center. Come alone. It's about what happened on the bridge." "Archie Miller." "It's from the fisherman who rescued me," explained Emily to the other two. "He says he discovered something important." "This could be a trap," Madison immediately warned. "How did he get your number?" "My contact is on the Equestrian Center's website. It's not hard to obtain," replied Emily, rereading the message. "And I don't think it's a trap. Archie saved me, remember? If he were working for Anthony, he could have simply left me in the river." "Still, it's risky," insisted Diana. "You shouldn't go alone. The message is clear. If he sees anyone else, he might not show up." While they discussed, none of them noticed the middle-aged man with the laptop, discreetly adjusting the device to better capture their conversation. Richard Miller had refined his surveillance techniques over the years working for Anthony, and the small directional microphone embedded in his computer was capturing every word. "I'll go to the meeting," decided Emily. "If Archie really has something important, it could be the missing piece for our case. At least let me be on standby, hidden nearby," Madison requested. "All right, but keep a safe distance." They continued elaborating the plan for another hour. arranging schedules and strategies. When they finally left the cafe, the rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and cold. The next morning, the New Horizon Equestrian Center was especially quiet. It was Saturday, a day without classes, only with basic maintenance activities and animal care. Emily arrived early and spent some time with Lightning, whispering to him about recent events, as if the horse could understand. "Today could be a decisive day, buddy," she said, brushing his shiny mane. "If Archie really has something concrete, we can finally prove what Anthony did." At 9:45 a.m., Emily directed her chair toward the maintenance shed, located at the back of the property. The place was used to store equipment, feed, and tools, and was rarely frequented on weekends. As she approached, she noticed that the door was slightly ajar. She hesitated for an instant, a shiver running down her spine. Something didn't seem right. She looked around, making sure Madison was in position, as agreed. She saw a discreet movement behind one of the stables, her friend, vigilant, determined. She pushed the door and entered the semi-lit shed. The smell of hay and wood was familiar, but there was something else in the air. An expensive masculine perfume that she would recognize anywhere. "Hello, Emily." Anthony Norton's voice emerged from the shadows, making her freeze. "It's not polite to keep someone waiting." He stepped forward, coming out from behind a stack of hay bales. He was wearing casual clothes for the first time since she had known him, jeans and a long-sleeve shirt, as if trying to blend into the rural environment. "Where's Archie?" demanded Emily, already preparing to retreat. "Unfortunately, Mr. Miller won't be able to attend," replied Anthony with false regret. "It seems he received an irresistible offer to work on a fishing boat on the south coast. Quite sudden, I agree, but opportunities like that don't wait." Emily felt her blood boil. "What did you do to him?" "Me? Absolutely nothing," replied Anthony, raising his hands in false innocence. "I just ensured he had a future. Far from here." His brother, Richard, was very persuasive. At this moment, Emily realized she had fallen into a trap. She tried to back away, but before she could reach the door, Richard Miller appeared behind, blocking her exit. "Not so fast, Miss Foster. We have unfinished business to resolve." Emily felt panic growing but maintained her composure. "Madison knows I'm here. If anything happens to me, you'll be the first suspect." "Your friend is a bit busy at the moment," replied Anthony with a cold smile. "One of my employees is detaining her with a convincing story about problems with the center's documentation." He approached, circling Emily's wheelchair like a predator. "So shall we finalize our negotiation? Where are the copies of the documents?" "I don't have anything with me anymore," she replied, keeping her voice firm despite her fear. "All copies are with people you can't reach." Anthony's countenance darkened. "I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation, Emily. I'm not asking. I'm demanding." Outside the shed, a powerful whinny cut through the air, followed by the sound of hooves beating hard on the ground. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. Lightning's whinny reverberated again, closer and more urgent. Anthony and Richard exchanged concerned looks. "What is that?" questioned Anthony, irritated by the interruption. "Just my horse," replied Emily, gaining confidence as she recognized the familiar sound. "He senses when I'm in danger." "Control that animal," Anthony ordered Richard, who hesitated before heading to the door. As soon as Richard opened the shed door, Lightning burst inside, imposing and agitated. The chestnut horse reared up, forcing Richard to quickly back away. His powerful hooves hit a pile of metal buckets, creating a clatter that echoed through the shed. Taking advantage of the confusion, Emily maneuvered her chair away from Anthony. "Lightning!" she called, and the animal immediately positioned itself by her side, snorting threateningly in the direction of the two men. "Control that beast," demanded Anthony, visibly disturbed by the animal's presence. "He's not a beast, he's my partner," replied Emily, caressing Lightning's neck to calm him, but keeping him alert. "And I think it's time for you two to leave." Richard, backed against the wall, looked apprehensively at the horse's hooves and then at Anthony, as if waiting for instructions. "This doesn't change anything, Emily," said Anthony, trying to regain control of the situation. "It only makes things more complicated for you." At this moment, Madison appeared at the shed door accompanied by Pete, the handler, and 2 more staff members from the equestrian center. "Emily," she called, relieved to find her friend. "I figured out the setup when that man started asking strange questions about documents that don't exist." "Good thing you brought reinforcements," replied Emily, without taking her eyes off Anthony. Pete stepped forward, his strong body, toughened by work in the field, commanding respect. "Any problem here, Miss Emily?" "Actually, Mr. Norton and his assistant were just leaving," she replied firmly. "Isn't that right, Anthony?" The businessman assessed the situation. They were outnumbered, and the horse remained agitated. With a forced smile, he straightened his clothes and regained his businesslike posture. "Certainly. We were just discussing the details of the new sponsorship," he said, with the tranquility of someone accustomed to lying. "We'll be in touch to finalize the terms." "That won't be necessary," replied Emily. "The New Horizon Equestrian Center is not interested in your money." Anthony narrowed his eyes but maintained his smile. "Think carefully, Emily. Your impulsiveness could cost you dearly." "Is that a threat?" "Just business advice," he replied, heading for the exit. Richard followed him closely, still casting nervous glances at Lightning. When the 2 men departed, Emily finally breathed a sigh of relief. Madison ran to hug her. "My God, Em, when I realized the trap, I almost went crazy." "How did you know?" asked Pete, confused by the whole situation. Emily exchanged glances with Madison, deciding how much she could reveal. She trusted Pete and the other employees, but involving them could put them at risk. "It's a long story," she finally replied, "but the important thing is that we're all okay." At that moment, Emily's cell phone rang. It was Diana. "I managed to talk to Gregory Turner," said the journalist, not wasting time with greetings. "He wants to meet us this afternoon. He seems very interested in the story." "Great news," replied Emily, feeling excited for the first time in days. "But maybe we should change the meeting location. Anthony is watching us more closely than we thought." After hanging up, Emily turned to Madison and the employees who had helped her. "I need you to maintain absolute secrecy about what happened here today," she requested, serious. "Anthony Norton is a dangerous man, and the fewer people who know about our disagreement, the better." Pete and the others nodded, although their faces showed they would like to know more details. "Count on us, Miss Emily," said Pete. "Everyone here knows how much you've done for this place and for the children." Hours later, Emily and Madison met with Diana in an unexpected location, the public aquarium in Riverdale. The journalist had suggested the place because it was busy, but allowed for discreet conversations, as well as having multiple exits in case they needed to leave quickly. "What happened at the equestrian center?" asked Diana, as soon as they settled on an isolated bench near a large tank of tropical fish. Emily reported the encounter with Anthony and how Lightning had appeared at the crucial moment. "That horse deserves a statue," commented Diana, impressed. "But this shows that Anthony is willing to do anything to silence us." "What did Gregory Turner say exactly?" asked Madison, nervously looking around every few minutes. "He wants to do a special report for Direct Connection," explained Diana. Excited. 2 entire segments just about Anthony Norton and his corruption scheme. With the documents we have, plus some testimonies, we can build a solid case." "What testimonies?" questioned Emily. "Archie mysteriously disappeared, and the other people who worked with Anthony are probably too scared to speak." Diana hesitated before answering. "Actually, I found someone who could be our key witness. Helena Wilson, former accountant at Norton Construction. She was fired 2 years ago after she started questioning some suspicious transactions." "And she agreed to speak?" asked Madison, surprised. "Initially, no, but when I mentioned your name, Emily, she changed her mind." Emily frowned, confused. "My name? Why? I don't even know her." "Apparently, she knows you, or rather, she knows your work. Her daughter Amy was your therapeutic riding student a few years ago." The memory instantly surfaced. Amy, a sweet 7-year-old girl at the time, with moderate cerebral palsy. Emily remembered the impressive progress the girl had made during the 6 months of therapy before moving to another city with her mother. Amy. Of course I remember, but I never knew her mother worked for Anthony. Helena said she kept it a secret at the time because she already suspected his activities and didn't want to put her daughter at risk, explained Diana. When she heard about what happened to you on the bridge, she decided it was time to speak up. A feeling of renewed hope took hold of Emily. Perhaps finally, the truth could come to light. When can we talk to her? She'll meet us at the Pennsylvania TV studio tomorrow at 2 p.m. along with Gregory, replied Diana. He wants to record the testimonies as soon as possible so the program can air next week. A week is still a long time, worried Madison. Anthony could find out and try to prevent it. That's why Gregory suggested we keep everything in absolute secrecy, agreed Diana. Only the three of us, him, his trusted producer, and Helena, will know about the recording. As they talked, they didn't notice the discreet figure who had sat a few benches away, apparently absorbed in the contemplation of exotic fish. Lucy Turner, Gregory's wife and a well-known socialite in Riverdale's elite circles, listened to each word with growing interest. Her lunch with Anthony Norton the next day had just gained a much more interesting topic of conversation than mere charity events. The Chateau Belvedere restaurant, atop Hillview Heights neighborhood, was known for its exclusivity and discretion. With only 12 strategically positioned tables to ensure privacy, it was the preferred location of Riverdale's elite for meetings that required confidentiality. Anthony Norton arrived punctually at 1 p.m., as was his custom. He was led by the maitre d' to his usual table, with a panoramic view of the city. While waiting, he savored an award-winning Bordeaux, appearing calm. However, internally, his mind was calculating possible scenarios and strategies to neutralize Emily and her allies. 15 minutes later, Lucy Turner crossed the dining room with the elegance of someone born to frequent such environments. Her peach-colored silk dress perfectly complemented her discreet but visibly expensive jewelry. Anthony stood up to receive her, kissing her face with the familiarity of old friends. Lucy, always dazzling, he complimented, pulling out the chair for her to sit. Anthony, always gallant, she replied with a studied smile. Sorry for the slight delay. The traffic downtown is impossible with the construction of the new subway line. Ironic, considering that the construction company responsible is my direct competitor, commented Anthony, signaling for the sommelier to serve wine to the newcomer. After the usual social rituals and the first courses being served, Lucy finally broached the subject that had led her to request this meeting. I heard you're expanding your investments into the media sector, she said casually. Gregory mentioned rumors that you might be interested in acquiring a stake in Pennsylvania TV. Anthony studied her face for a moment before responding. Your contacts remain impeccable, my dear. It is indeed a strategic move we're considering. Fascinating, replied Lucy, taking a sip of wine. Especially considering the program my husband is preparing for next week. And what program would that be? Lucy smiled, enjoying the moment of advantage. A special investigation. 2 entire segments about a certain influential businessman from Riverdale and his corruption schemes. She made a dramatic pause. It would be a shame if such a report affected the value of the station's shares before your acquisition. Anthony maintained a neutral expression, though his fingers slightly tightened around the wine glass. I'm curious to know more details about this investigation. Well, from what I understand, a certain journalist named Diana Cameron has obtained compromising documents. They plan to record testimonies this afternoon, including one from a former employee of yours, Helena Wilson, if I'm not mistaken. The name made Anthony narrow his eyes. Helena was a potential danger, too intelligent and with access to information that could complicate his situation. And how did you discover these very specific details? Let's say I have a talent for being in the right places at the right times, she replied enigmatically. I overheard an interesting conversation at the public aquarium yesterday. 3 women very focused on bringing down a certain empire. Anthony set down his cutlery and interlaced his fingers, looking directly at Lucy. Why are you telling me this, Lucy? I'm sure Gregory wouldn't approve. My husband is an idealist, she replied with a certain impatience. He believes journalism can change the world. Meanwhile, we live in a penthouse we can't properly maintain, and he refuses all invitations for more lucrative programs in the name of journalistic integrity. Ah, so that's it, concluded Anthony with an understanding smile. I've always admired your practical sense, dear. I prefer to call it realism, she corrected. Gregory can have his principles, but I have other priorities. And what do you expect to receive in exchange for this valuable information? Lucy leaned slightly forward, lowering her voice. When you acquire a stake in Pennsylvania TV, I want Gregory to be promoted to news director. He deserves the recognition, even if he never knows how he got it. And of course, financial compensation for my perspicacity. Seems fair, agreed Anthony, raising his glass in a silent toast. Consider it done. Meanwhile, at the Pennsylvania TV studios, Emily, Madison, and Diana were nervously awaiting the arrival of Helena Wilson and Gregory Turner. The studio was surprisingly empty for a weekday. Where is everyone? Asked Madison, intrigued by the silence in the place. Gregory dismissed most of the team to ensure discretion, explained Diana. Only his trusted producer will be present for the recording. Emily checked the clock for the third time. It's already 2:15 p.m. Could something have happened? In response, the studio door opened. Gregory Turner entered hurriedly, looking concerned. Tall, with prematurely gray hair that contrasted with his young face, he had the characteristic presence of TV professionals. Sorry for the delay, he said, greeting them quickly. We have a problem. Helena called saying she's not coming. What? Exclaimed Diana, standing up. But she confirmed last night. She seemed scared on the phone, explained Gregory. She just said she received an offer she couldn't refuse, a job abroad, all expenses paid for her and her daughter. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of disappointment. Anthony got to her, she concluded, reopening her eyes with renewed determination. But we still have the documents. We can proceed without her testimony. Gregory hesitated, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. We also have another problem. The station director called me an hour ago. He said the program is suspended until further notice, something about schedule review and potential defamation lawsuits. This can't be a coincidence, declared Madison. Indignant. He's always one step ahead of us. Diana was watching Gregory attentively. How did he find out about the report? We were the only ones who knew. A heavy silence took over the studio as everyone processed the same question. Gregory seemed genuinely disturbed. I have no idea. I only mentioned it to my producer, and he stopped, as if an uncomfortable idea had arisen. And I mentioned to Lucy last night that I would have an important meeting today. Does your wife know Anthony Norton? Asked Emily directly. Gregory hesitated before answering. They frequent the same social circles. Lucy organizes charity events, and Anthony is one of the main donors. A new silence, even more charged, settled in the studio. No one needed to verbalize the suspicion that hung in the air. What do we do now? Finally asked Madison. It seems like all doors are closing. Emily looked at each of them before answering, her voice firm. Anthony may have money and influence, but we have the truth on our side. If traditional media are blocked, we need to find new paths. What paths? Questioned Diana, clearly frustrated. The internet, replied Emily after a few seconds of reflection. If we can't use TV or newspapers, we'll use social media, independent blogs, video platforms. It's risky, pondered Gregory. Without the backing of a traditional outlet, you become more vulnerable to lawsuits. What's more risky is allowing Anthony to continue acting with impunity, countered Emily. He's already tried to eliminate me once. What would stop him from trying again? Diana slowly nodded, a new determination arising in her gaze. I have some contacts in independent journalism portals, people committed to the truth who aren't easily intimidated. And I can help with the technical part, offered Gregory, surprising everyone. I can't use the TV structure, but I have personal equipment. I can record testimonies, edit material, all discreetly. Are you sure? asked Emily. "This could cost you your job." "Maybe," he admitted, "but it would cost much more to my conscience to stand by while the truth is suffocated." Outside the studio, Richard Miller was observing the group through a small window in the door. Satisfied with what he'd seen, he quietly moved away and picked up his cell phone. "Boss, they're in the studio, but from what I understand, the report was cancelled. They seem to be considering other options now. Internet, blogs, that kind of thing." Anthony's voice sounded calm on the other end of the line. "Excellent. Continue monitoring. I want to know every step they take." "And what about the therapeutic riding instructor?" There was a pause before the answer. "She's already caused too many problems. Prepare plan B for tonight. It's time to eliminate the problem at the root." Night fell over the New Horizon Equestrian Center, bringing with it a silence broken only by the occasional neighing of horses and the whisper of wind through the trees. It was almost 10 p.m. when Emily finished her routine, checking that all animals were well accommodated before leaving. After the day's events, she had decided to spend the night in the small lodging attached to the center. The idea of returning to her empty apartment didn't seem safe, especially considering that Anthony knew where she lived. "Are you sure you don't want to stay at my house?" asked Madison for the third time, reluctant to leave her friend alone. "I'm sure," replied Emily, adjusting the blanket over Lightning. "I prefer to stay here with the horses. Besides, if Anthony wants to find me, I don't want to involve your family in this." Madison hugged her friend tightly. "Promise you'll lock everything and call me if anything suspicious happens." "I promise," assured Emily, smiling. "Now go home. Your kids are waiting." After Madison left, Emily checked all the doors and windows of the center, making sure they were properly locked. The lodging was simple but comfortable: a small bedroom with bathroom, a kitchenette, and a modest living area. She had slept there several times during tournaments or when an animal needed special care during the night. While preparing tea, her cell phone rang. It was Diana. "I have news," said the journalist without preamble. "I managed to schedule a meeting with the Transparency Portal staff for tomorrow at 10 a.m. They're super interested in our story." "That's great," replied Emily, feeling a new breath of hope. "Who else will be there?" "Me, you, Madison if she can, and Gregory confirmed he'll go. He has some contacts there too." "And do you trust these people? After today's leak?" There was a pause before Diana answered. "I understand your concern, but the Transparency Portal has a history of publications against powerful people. They've already faced lawsuits and pressure before, and they remain firm. They're our best bet now." After hanging up, Emily drank her tea while mentally organizing everything they would need to present at the meeting. The documents were secure in several digital copies, including one she kept on a memory card hidden inside a horseshoe-shaped pendant she wore around her neck, a gift from the center's children on her birthday the previous year. Around 11:30 p.m., when she was about to go to bed, she heard a noise coming from the stables area. Initially, she thought it was just one of the horses being restless, but soon she noticed a pattern in the sounds that suggested human movement. Her heart raced. She picked up her cell phone to call the police, but there was no signal. "Strange," she thought. "The signal here is normally good." She tried the landline in the lodging, but the line was dead. The feeling of being in a trap was oppressive. Emily maneuvered her chair to the window and peered through the blinds. In the darkness, illuminated only by the moon and some external security lights, she could distinguish two silhouettes moving furtively between the stables. "They came for me," she concluded, calculating her options. Staying in the lodging would be like waiting in a trap. She needed to act. With determination, she took a powerful flashlight from the drawer and silently headed for the back door. This exit led directly to the main pasture, where she could try to reach the secondary road and seek help at the neighboring property. Upon opening the door, however, she came face to face with Richard Miller, who seemed equally surprised by the encounter. "Where do you think you're going, Ms. Foster?" he asked, quickly recovering from the surprise. Emily didn't respond. In a quick movement, she turned on the flashlight directly into Richard's eyes, momentarily blinding him, and propelled her chair forward with all the force she possessed. The impact caught Richard off guard, knocking him to the side. "Help!" she shouted, advancing through the dark pasture as fast as her chair would allow on the irregular terrain. "Somebody help me!" Behind her, she could hear Richard getting up and calling his partner. "She's escaping through the pasture!" The rough terrain made the escape difficult. The wheels of the chair occasionally sank into the soft earth, forcing Emily to make extraordinary efforts to maintain movement. The adrenaline, however, gave her a strength she didn't know she possessed. She managed to gain some distance, but soon realized she was being cornered. The pasture fence limited her options, and the two men were now dividing to surround her from both sides. It was then that the agitated neighs began. Coming from the main stable, they were led by Lightning's unmistakable sound. The horses sensed the danger, their agitation growing with each second. A metallic crash echoed across the property, the stable door being violently opened. Seconds later, the sound of hooves in a gallop took over the place. The horses, led by Lightning, burst into the pasture, causing total confusion. Richard and his partner, identified by Emily as one of Norton Construction's security guards, were caught by surprise by the herd. They tried to protect themselves, but ended up having to run to avoid being trampled by the frightened animals. Lightning, however, wasn't running aimlessly. With the incredible perception he had demonstrated before, the animal headed directly toward Emily. He stopped beside her, agitated but attentive as if waiting for instructions. "Good boy," she whispered, quickly caressing his neck. "We need help." As if understanding, Lightning strongly whinnied and galloped towards the neighboring house, where lights were beginning to turn on in response to the commotion. Richard, recovering from the initial scare, advanced again toward Emily. "Enough games," he said, now with a threatening expression. "The boss wants you to disappear, and that's what's going to happen." Emily backed away, trying to buy time. "If anything happens to me, the documents will be automatically released. I have a system programmed for that." "Interesting bluff," replied Richard, coming closer. "But the boss has already taken care of all your contacts. The journalist, the presenter, your friend. Nobody's going to help you now." Panic threatened to dominate Emily, but she suppressed it. She couldn't believe that Anthony had reached all her allies simultaneously. Richard was trying to destabilize her. "Then why are you here?" she challenged. "If you've already neutralized everyone, why bother coming after me?" Richard's momentary hesitation confirmed her suspicion. He was bluffing, at least partially. At that moment, flashlight beams appeared on the neighboring property, and male voices began to call out, "Is anybody there? Is everything okay?" "Here," shouted Emily with all her strength. "Help, they're trying to attack me." Richard looked at the approaching lights, and then at his partner, who was making urgent gestures for them to retreat. "This isn't over," he threatened, before running toward the darkness along with the other man. Minutes later, Pete, the handler, arrived running with two men from the neighboring farm. All carried flashlights and agricultural tools that could serve as improvised weapons. "Miss Emily, what happened?" asked Pete, breathless. "I came to check on the horses when I heard the commotion and found the stable open." Two men invaded the property, she explained, still trembling from the adrenaline. "They tried to attack me. One of the neighbors, a middle-aged gentleman whom Emily recognized as Mr. Oliver, owner of the adjacent farm, pointed to tire marks at the entrance of the equestrian center. There's a car leaving at high speed down the road. I'll call the police." "Thank you," said Emily, finally feeling the weight of the danger she had faced. "And thank you for coming so quickly." "Thank your horse," replied Mr. Oliver with a surprised smile. "That chestnut appeared on my porch, whinnying like crazy. When he started pulling my sleeve with his teeth, I realized something was very wrong." Emily looked at Lightning, who was now peacefully grazing a few yards away, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "He's really special," she murmured, wiping away a tear. While waiting for the police, Emily tried to call Madison and Diana, but couldn't reach either of them. A new wave of concern invaded her. What if Richard had been telling the truth? What if Anthony had really gone after her allies? At the police station a few hours later, Emily was reporting what had happened to Detective Paul Reynolds, the same one who had questioned her at the hospital. "So you're saying Anthony Norton sent men to attack you?" he asked, noting the details. "Yes. His head of security, Richard Miller, was there personally." The detective observed her with an enigmatic expression. "Ms. Foster, since our first meeting at the hospital, I felt there was more to your story than a simple accident. Now, with this new occurrence..." He paused as if pondering his next words. "Perhaps it's time you told me the whole truth." Emily hesitated. Trusting authorities when a man as powerful as Anthony was involved was risky. But Detective Reynolds seemed genuinely interested in helping. "I have documents," she finally said. "Proof of corruption schemes involving Anthony Norton. That's why he tried to eliminate me on the suspension bridge. And that's why he sent his men after me tonight." Paul Reynolds leaned back in his chair, his gaze now penetrating. "Show me this evidence." The morning light filtered through the blinds of the meeting room at the Anti-Corruption Police Department, where Emily had been transferred after her initial conversation with Detective Paul Reynolds. Physically and emotionally exhausted, she still maintained the determination that characterized her, methodically explaining each document projected on the screen in front of her. "This contract shows the overcharging for the municipal administrative complex," she pointed out, while Detective Sonia Martinez, a financial crimes specialist, took notes. "And here are the proof of deposits to offshore accounts linked to Anthony's front men." The team of investigators had been working intensely since the early hours of the morning, cross-referencing information and verifying the authenticity of the documents provided by Emily. Detective Reynolds entered the room bringing coffees for everyone. "We've made contact with your friend, Madison," he informed, handing a cup to Emily. "She's okay, just scared. Apparently, unknown men tried to enter her house during the night, but the alarm went off and they fled before the police arrived." "And Diana?" asked Emily, relieved that Madison was safe, but still worried about the journalist. "Still trying to locate her," replied Reynolds, his expression serious. "But we've already sent a patrol car to her apartment." Sonia hung up a call and joined them, her normally austere face now animated with news. "I just spoke with the FBI. They've had Anthony Norton on their radar for several months as part of a larger investigation into a construction company cartel. Our documents perfectly complement what they already had." "That mean," began Emily, almost afraid to hope. "It means we already have enough for a search and seizure warrant," completed Reynolds. "The judge of the 3rd Criminal Court just authorized it. Teams are preparing to execute it at Norton Construction Headquarters and his residence." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt she could breathe freely. However, the concern about Diana still troubled her. "I need to find Diana," she insisted. "I fear Anthony may have gone after her too." At that moment, the door to the room abruptly opened and Diana entered, accompanied by a police officer. Her face showed fatigue, but her eyes shone with determination. "Sorry I'm late to the party," she said, trying to smile despite her evident exhaustion. "I had to take a detour." "Where were you?" asked Emily, relieved to see her friend intact. "We tried calling you all night." "I noticed I was being followed when leaving the TV studio yesterday," explained Diana, accepting the coffee that Reynolds offered her. "So instead of going home, I went straight to the airport and caught the first available flight to Washington, D.C. "Washington, D.C.?" several asked at the same time. Diana smiled, now genuinely. "I have a source in the federal prosecutor's office. I thought if Anthony was closing all doors in Riverdale, we needed to take the case to a sphere where he had less influence. I delivered copies of everything to my source and returned on the first flight this morning." Sonia nodded, impressed with the initiative. "Smart move. With the federal prosecutor's office involved, the case takes on another dimension." Reynolds's phone rang and everyone watched as he answered. His expression gradually changed to satisfaction. "That was the search and seizure team," he informed upon hanging up. "They found a safe in Anthony's private office with compromising documents, and a laptop with emails that seemed to confirm everything Emily showed us." "And Anthony?" asked Emily. "Apparently he tried to leave the country last night. He had a private jet prepared at the executive airport, but we were already monitoring suspicious movements after your report, and we managed to prevent the takeoff. He's being brought in for questioning as we speak." The news was received with a mixture of relief and disbelief by everyone in the room. For Emily, it seemed almost unreal that after so many obstacles, justice was finally materializing. "There's one more thing you should know," added Diana, opening her backpack and removing an envelope. "When I went to Washington, my source at the federal prosecutor's office told me about a witness they had recently located, Archie Miller, the fisherman who saved me." Emily leaned forward, surprised. "Anthony said he had been sent away." "And he was," confirmed Diana. "Richard Miller, his brother, put him on a fishing boat headed for the south coast with orders not to return. But Archie jumped ship at the first stop and instead of fleeing far away, went straight to Washington to report what he had witnessed on the bridge." Diana opened the envelope, revealing photographs. "The most incredible part is this. Archie had a waterproof camera he used to photograph fish species for an environmental preservation project. On the night of your accident, he took several photos of the rescue, including one that clearly shows you mentioning you had been pushed. And more importantly, she separated a specific photograph, passing it to Emily, who gasped upon seeing the image. In the upper corner of the photo, partially visible at the edges of the frame, was Anthony Norton observing the rescue from the opposite bank of the river. He came back to verify if I really... Emily couldn't complete the sentence. "Exactly," confirmed Diana, and Archie captured that moment without realizing it. Anthony's presence there, watching, completely contradicts his claim that he was in a video conference with Japanese investors that night. 3 weeks later, the New Horizon Equestrian Center was in celebration. Children ran across the lawn decorated with colorful pennants, parents chatted animatedly in groups, and the horses displayed festive bows on their saddles. A large banner at the entrance announced, "Inauguration of the new therapeutic riding Wing Lightning of Hope project." Emily, in her gleaming wheelchair, a gift from the parents of the children who attended the center, was conversing with the mayor of Riverdale, who had personally attended the ceremony. "It's an honor to have the city's support for the project, Mr. Mayor," she said, proudly observing the new facilities that would significantly expand the center's capacity. "The honor is all ours, Ms. Foster," replied the mayor, visibly impressed with the structure. "After everything that happened, the least we can do is ensure that legitimate social projects like this receive the support they deserve." Madison approached, accompanied by Diana, both carrying glasses of non-alcoholic champagne. "A toast to our heroine," proposed Madison, extending a glass to Emily. "None of that," protested Emily, blushing slightly. "We're a team. Without you two, without Detective Reynolds, without Archie, none of this would be possible. And without Lightning, of course," added Diana, pointing to the majestic chestnut horse grazing peacefully in the center of the field, as if he knew he was the guest of honor at the party. "Especially without Lightning," agreed Emily, her gaze softening as she observed the animal. The exposure of Anthony Norton's corruption scheme had become one of the biggest political business scandals in Pennsylvania in recent years. Diana's report for the Transparency Portal, complemented by a special series on Gregory Turner's program, who had regained his editorial autonomy after Anthony's preventive arrest, revealed ramifications of the scheme that affected various sectors of the public administration. Richard Miller had accepted a plea deal, providing crucial details about the construction company's illegal operations and implicating other businessmen and politicians. As for Anthony, he had initially denied all accusations, but the evidence was overwhelming. His empire was beginning to crumble, with the company's shares plummeting on the stock exchange and contracts being cancelled. Helena Wilson had returned to Riverdale after Anthony's arrest, bringing her daughter Amy, now 10 years old, to resume therapeutic riding sessions. The girl was running across the lawn of the party, her mobility significantly improved since the last time Emily had seen her. "Look what I learned, Miss Emily," exclaimed Amy, approaching with a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked. "Mum said you like daisies." "They're beautiful, Amy," replied Emily, receiving the bouquet with affection. "And you're so tall. I can't wait to see you riding again." "Will Lightning let me ride him?" asked the girl, looking with admiration at the horse. "I'm sure he will. He's very special, you know. He saved my life." Amy nodded solemnly. "Mom told me the story. He's a four-legged superhero." The party continued throughout the afternoon, with presentations by the children who attended the center and therapeutic riding demonstrations for interested visitors. When the sun began to set, tinting Riverdale's sky with orange tones, Emily found a moment of quietude near the main stable. Lightning approached, as if sensing her need for company. She caressed the animal's muzzle, feeling a gratitude that words couldn't express. "You know, buddy, I never imagined my fight for justice would end like this," she confided to the horse, who listened with the singular attention he had always demonstrated. "I thought it would be just me against Anthony, but I discovered I was never really alone." Madison joined them, sitting on a nearby bench. "Talking to yourself again?" she joked. "Conversing with the true hero of this story," corrected Emily, smiling. "The preliminary results of the audit on municipal works are in," informed Madison. "The city has already recovered almost 30 million that had been diverted. Part of that amount will be directed to social projects, including ours." "Amazing. How things can change so quickly," reflected Emily. "A month ago we were struggling to keep the center running, and now we're expanding. And this is just the beginning," added Madison, looking around with pride. "With the new funding, we can serve twice as many children next year." Emily's cell phone rang. It was Diana. "Emily, turn on the TV now, Channel 9. Madison quickly took the tablet she carried in her bag and accessed the streaming of the indicated channel. Gregory Turner was presenting a special bulletin. The judicial decision on the Norton case has just been released. In addition to the conviction for active corruption, cartel formation, and money laundering, Anthony Norton was found guilty of the attempted murder of therapeutic riding instructor Emily Foster. The total sentence exceeds 25 years in prison. Richard Miller, for his cooperation with justice, received a reduced sentence. Emily and Madison looked at each other, tears of relief forming in the eyes of both. They weren't tears of vengeance or satisfaction at another's misfortune, but for the feeling that justice, so often elusive, had finally prevailed. In the Otinu distance, the children continued playing, their laughter echoing through the equestrian center. The setting sun cast a final golden ray over the field, illuminating Lightning as if nature wanted to pay its own tribute to the extraordinary animal. Emily observed the scene with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The challenges hadn't ended, they never really do, but now she faced the future with the certainty that no matter how powerful the adversary, truth would always find its way. And sometimes that way would come galloping in the form of a chestnut, horse guided by a bond that transcended human understanding. "You know what impresses me most about this whole story?" asked Madison, interrupting Emily's thoughts. "What?" "How an animal managed to show more humanity than many people we know." Emily smiled, caressing Lightning once more. "Maybe that's what we need to learn. True strength isn't in power or money, but in the genuine connection we establish with those around us, human or not." In the distance, dark clouds were beginning to form on the horizon, announcing another storm approaching Riverdale. But this time, Emily felt no fear. She had faced the worst possible storm and emerged stronger. The wind gently stirred her chair, bringing the scent of the wildflowers that Amy had picked. A new cycle was beginning, a cycle of reconstruction, of hope, and above all, of revealed justice.